He dropped to one knee, the room holding its breath. "I've spent 6 months earning the right to ask you this. Lily Hart, will you marry me? Not as the billionaire, not as the CEO, just as the man who loves you more than all the cupcakes in Halcyon Bay." In the tiny velvet box, there wasn't a diamond. There was a silver cupcake charm glinting with a single sprinkle of diamond dust, a symbol of where their journey began, not in luxury, but in laughter, chaos, and flower. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about transformation, about how a hardened corporate titan fell for a stubborn flour-covered baker and discovered that the best mergers don't happen in boardrooms, they happen in kitchens, over burnt cookies, broken ovens, and hearts brave enough to try again. So if you believe that kindness is still powerful, that love can bridge impossible gaps, and that sometimes the sweetest beginnings come from the most unexpected places, then this story was made for you. Like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories, because now it's time to begin. It was nearing 6 o'clock in the evening when the dusky sky draped itself over Halcyon Bay, painting the skyscrapers in golden melancholy. From above, the city pulsed with light, unaware of what was unfolding atop one of its tallest buildings. A sleek obsidian helicopter whispered its way down onto the rooftop of Quinn and Vale International. Inside the penthouse boardroom, Nathaniel Quinn, a man in his early 40s known as much for his precision as his power, stood motionless at the head of a long glass table. Across from him sat 11 executives, seasoned, confident. Until now, silence clung to the walls like fog. "I want your resignations, all of you," Nathaniel said calmly, yet with a chill that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. Not a single voice rose in protest, only stunned glances and trembling hands. "All except you, Carter," he added, glancing at his assistant. A man in his late 20s who looked like he'd just swallowed a handful of pins. "You'll help them pack." As the quiet shuffle of expensive shoes echoed toward the elevator, Carter lingered. "Sir, this is the second leadership team you've replaced in just 5 weeks. Nathaniel adjusted the cuff of his custom-tailored suit, a quiet symbol of his obsession with order. "Then perhaps the third will be adequate." Just a few neighborhoods away, in a much older part of town, Lily Hart, 32, and radiant in her quiet resilience, stood elbow-deep in flour. Her modest bakery, the hearthstone oven, smelled of cinnamon and nostalgia, but her ancient stove had once again chosen chaos. "Come on now, Mabel," she whispered, patting the side of the oven like an old friend. "Just one more batch, and I swear I'll retire you." She was working overtime to bake for a community fundraiser, something about feeding children during the winter break. Her back ached, but her spirit was light, until the door slammed open. A man in a sharp suit stormed in, phone pressed to his ear, his voice slicing through the air. "I said, buy the entire bundle. I don't care if their stocks are diving, just get it done." Lily blinked. Her hands were covered in dough, her face dusted with flour. She smiled anyway. "Sorry, sir, we're closed for the day. Black coffee." Now the man snapped without so much as a glance. "This isn't a coffee shop, but I do have a few cranberry scones from yesterday, if you're brave." He finally looked at her, and in that fleeting moment, something shifted. Her soft brown eyes met the storm in his, and then his phone rang again. "What do you mean?" "The contract collapsed," he growled before storming out, leaving only the scent of expensive cologne behind. Lily shrugged and turned back to her tray, a song humming quietly in her throat. Outside. Nathaniel paused on the sidewalk. Through the frosted window, he could still see her, gentle, grounded, as if untouched by the chaos of the world he ruled. And just like that, the man who had once made oil magnates flinch, hesitated. Later that night, as Lily swept the last bits of flour from the wooden floor, she spotted something tucked beneath a napkin on the counter, a crisp $100 bill and a scribbled note. "For the coffee that never was." She smiled, amused and a little touched, before slipping the bill into a worn glass jar labeled, "For the kids." "Rich folks are strange," she whispered, but there was warmth in her voice. The next morning, Nathaniel's driver Miles caught him staring out the car window as they passed by that same quiet street. Through the glass, Lily was spinning with a mop, singing into it, like it was a microphone from some forgotten dream. Nathaniel's mouth didn't quite smile, but the edge of it softened. "Would you like me to stop, Sir?" Miles asked. "Don't be ridiculous," Nathaniel muttered. But his gaze lingered long after the little bakery disappeared in the rearview mirror. At Quinn and Vale, his temper returned with thunder. These revenue forecasts looked like they were written by toddlers. He barked at the new CFO, "Find someone who can count." Yet beneath the fury, his thoughts kept returning to a woman covered in flour, and a laugh that had no place in his world, but somehow echoed louder than everything else. That afternoon, Lily received a phone call that made her drop her whisk. "Miss Hart, this is Quinn and Vale. Mr. Quinn would like to speak with you." Around 8:30 that morning, the phone at the Hearthstone oven rang with an urgency that set Lily's nerves on edge. She wiped her hands on her apron and answered. "Miss Hart, Mr. Quinn would like to place an order, 500 cupcakes. They're needed for tomorrow morning's executive summit." Lily blinked. "Tomorrow? That's impossible. My oven barely survives small batches, let alone 500. There was a pause. Then a clipped voice responded. "Mr. Quinn does not acknowledge the word impossible." She inhaled slowly, grounding herself. "Then I'm afraid Mr. Quinn will have to make an exception." A heavy silence followed. In a sleek office high above Halcyon Bay, Nathaniel Quinn snatched the receiver from Carter's startled hands. "This is Quinn. Did I just hear you refuse me?" "You did," Lily said evenly. "Unless you'd like to stop by and help me bake them yourself." Nathaniel froze. No one had spoken to him like that in over a decade. It was so brazen, so unfiltered, that he found himself intrigued. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Bring an apron." Lily replied sweetly, and hung up without another word. Sir Carter stammered, eyes wide. "You're not seriously." But Nathaniel was already in the elevator, a strange cocktail of irritation and anticipation simmering just beneath his composed exterior. It had been a long time since anyone had stood their ground against him, and it stirred something unexpected. When the sleek silver rolls pulled up in front of the bakery, he spotted her through the glass elbows deep in batter, a smear of flour across her cheek, laughing as she tried to wrangle 3 mixing bowls at once. His heart gave an odd, reluctant skip. Sir Miles asked from the front seat, noting the pause. Nathaniel adjusted his collar. "Wait here, this won't take long." But the moment he opened the door and Lily turned toward him, sunlight catching the flower in her hair, a spark of challenge in her eyes, Nathaniel Quinn sensed that something in his carefully calibrated world had just shifted. "Ready to roll up your sleeves?" "Mr. Quinn," Lily asked, holding out a pink apron decorated with cartoon unicorns. Nathaniel stared at it like she'd handed him a live grenade. For the first time in 2 decades, he had no idea what to say. Moments later, the titan of industry stood behind the bakery counter, his expensive blazer tossed aside, wearing the unicorn apron over a shirt that cost more than Lily's monthly rent. A fine dusting of flour had already settled on his shoulders. He held a whisk like it was an alien object. "This feels unsanitary," he muttered. "You're holding it wrong." Lily giggled, stepping behind him to adjust his grip. The closeness sent a jolt through him, unexpected and strangely welcome. "I've negotiated multi-billion-dollar contracts," he grumbled. "How hard can this be?" Famous last words. 20 minutes later, the kitchen looked like a war zone. Batter streaked the counter, the floor, and somehow Nathaniel's hair. "You don't fold ingredients by attacking them," Lily teased gently, brushing frosting from his jaw. Their eyes met briefly, intensely, and the air seemed to hum with something unspoken. He cleared his throat. "Aggressive methods produce results." "Well, mister." "Aggressive," Lily said, pointing to a dented bowl on the ground. "You just declared war on my mixing equipment." Outside, through the bakery window, 2 men in suits watched in astonishment as their powerful employer painstakingly tried to pipe frosting onto a tray of cupcakes, his tongue poking slightly from the side of his mouth in concentration. "Is he—" "Smiling," one whispered. "Quick, someone call the newspaper?" The other murmured, "He's having a human moment." Back inside, just as Nathaniel was attempting to salvage a ruined cupcake, the old oven let out a dramatic wheeze and puffed a cloud of smoke before going completely still. "Oh no, Mabel, not now." Lily sighed, bending toward the lifeless stove. Without hesitation, Nathaniel reached for his phone. "Carter, find this woman the finest oven on the market. Today." Lily's head snapped up. "No." He turned to her. "Excuse me. I don't need your charity. Mr. Quinn." He smiled faintly, eyes amused. "It's not charity, it's an investment in my 500 cupcakes." She folded her arms. "Then you're going to earn it. Every single one of those cupcakes that knocks $10 off your tab," Lily said, wiping her hands on a towel as she glanced at Nathaniel, who now had a streak of frosting on his cheek and a look of surprise in his eyes. His eyebrows rose. People usually lined up to ask for his money. No one had ever refused it before. "You're bargaining with me?" he asked, genuinely amused. "Someone has to keep your ego grounded," she replied with a teasing wink. Over the next few hours, something curious unfolded, something neither of them expected. Nathaniel, who hadn't laughed from the gut in more than a decade, found himself grinning like a schoolboy, his hands sticky with frosting and his tie long forgotten on a chair. Lily's puns were terrible, her jokes even worse, but somehow they disarmed him completely. Between jokes and batter spills, she told him about her dream turning the bakery into a place where local kids could come after school to learn how to bake, to feel safe to belong. "Why not just pitch to investors?" Nathaniel asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because not everything's meant to be bought, Mr. Quinn," she said softly. "Some things you have to earn, like trust, like love, like the perfect buttercream." By the time the clock brushed past midnight, the last cupcake stood proudly on the tray, the 500th in a long line of colorful, sugar-dusted treats. But instead of relief, Nathaniel felt an odd weight in his chest. "I'll see you again tomorrow," he asked, almost hopeful. Lily raised an eyebrow. "Don't you have empires to conquer? They'll survive a day without me." To his surprise and hers, he meant it. The next morning, the entire building of Quinn & Vale was buzzing like a hive. The CEO had arrived nearly an hour later than usual, his hair dusted with flour, and most shockingly of all, he was humming. Humming, one assistant whispered, eyes wide. "Cancel the meetings," Nathaniel said, breezing past his stunned staff. Sir Carter followed, baffled. "The meeting with the Tokyo partners can wait. I have a frosting tutorial," Nathaniel replied, disappearing into his office with a bounce in his step that had never been there before. At the board meeting, suited executives hesitated as they eyed the spread of colorful cupcakes. Nathaniel watched them like a proud parent at a science fair. When the CFO began droning about missed projections, Nathaniel calmly handed him a red velvet cupcake. "Taste that," he said. "That's what success should feel like." Later that afternoon, Lily opened the bakery door to find a delivery truck outside. Dozens of gleaming new ovens were being unloaded. She blinked in disbelief. Tucked beneath a shipping invoice was a note in Nathaniel's crisp handwriting. "For Mabel's retirement, and for the place you haven't built yet but will." She dialed his number, nearly speechless. "I said one oven. The rest are for your community space." Nathaniel replied, "Think of it as an aggressive acquisition. Of your dream. You can't just bulldoze your way into my life, you know." "We'll negotiate," he said lightly. That evening, Nathaniel returned not in a suit, but in jeans and a soft, slightly wrinkled t-shirt that his assistant had frantically purchased that morning. Lily nearly dropped a tray of cooling scones. "Who are you, and what have you done with Mr. Corporate?" "The suit's at the cleaners," he said. "Turns out buttercream is more stubborn than quarterly losses." As they baked, Lily shared childhood stories, memories of her grandmother's kitchen, warm laughter, and a belief that food made with love could heal even the hardest hearts. And somewhere between rolling dough and folding batter, Nathaniel found himself opening up too. He spoke quietly about his childhood, about boardrooms instead of birthday parties, and a father who taught him that feelings were liabilities. "You know what your real problem is," Lily said, tapping his nose with a finger coated in flour. "Do tell, wise oracle, you've forgotten how to play." Before he could reply, she tossed a handful of flour at him. What followed was pure chaos. Laughter filled the bakery as they ducked and danced through a flurry of white. The room, blanketed like a winter storm, had burst indoors. Nathaniel was laughing so hard he had to lean against the counter for support. As the mess settled and they began to clean their hands, met over the same cloth. The laughter faded, replaced by something deeper, something neither of them quite knew how to name. "Lily," he whispered, voice low and rough. She swallowed. "We should finish up." But neither of them moved. A loud crash from the alley shattered the moment. Lily rushed outside and found Henry, a familiar face from the neighborhood, huddled near the bins, his hands trembling from the cold. "I saved you some sandwiches," she said gently, handing him a paper bag. Henry looked up with gratitude, shining in his tired eyes. "You're an angel, just a baker." She smiled. With good timing, Nathaniel stood by the bakery's doorway, quietly watching as Lily knelt beside the man outside, her voice low and kind, offering him food with the same ease she offered a smile. It caught him off guard, this quiet grace, this instinct to give without hesitation. In the world he ruled, people were categorized useful or disposable asset or liability, but in hers, even the forgotten were seen, acknowledged, honored. "You're something else," he said softly when she returned inside. "I'm just me." She shrugged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Nothing too exciting." "That's where you're wrong," he murmured, but she had already turned back to the counter, humming faintly as she wiped flour from the surface, blissfully unaware that she was piece by piece dismantling everything he thought he understood about life. That night, Nathaniel stood alone in his high-rise apartment, surrounded by glass and silence. From the enormous window, he could almost trace the faint glow of her neighborhood across the city. How could someone with flour in her hair and laughter in her voice manage to unravel the foundation he'd built his life upon? His phone rang. "Sir, the Morrison acquisition is ready. All we need is your green light." He stared out at the city lights, something shifting quietly inside him. "Put it on hold," he said after a pause. "We're reevaluating the strategy." He ended the call, a small, almost incredulous smile tugging at his lips. She was right. Not everything worth having could be bought, but maybe it could be earned. 3 weeks into whatever strange rhythm their lives had begun to share, Nathaniel Quinn found himself in a place his former self would have mocked, sitting cross-legged on the flour-dusted floor of the hearthstone oven at 2 a.m, drinking cheap wine out of mismatched mugs and debating the emotional depth of puppet characters. "I'm telling you, Miss Piggy is the British Prime Minister," Lily said, tossing popcorn into her mouth. Nathaniel shook his head, laughing a real, unguarded laugh that still felt foreign in his own throat. "And Kermit is far too emotionally balanced to represent the Federal Reserve." Suddenly, both their phones buzzed. Lily glanced at hers. "Oh no. Emergency text. My best friend's stuck on a horrible date. I need to rescue her." Nathaniel raised his own phone. 6 missed calls from Tokyo. A falling portfolio. A message from his board. "Where are you?" They looked at each other, then spoke in unison. Sweet Caroline's Greenwich Village, and burst into laughter. "Wait, your friends are there too?" Lily asked. Nathaniel nodded. "My board always goes there after pretending they'll vote me out. Yearly ritual drinks and false courage." "Oh no," she giggled. "We cannot let them meet. My people are chaotic and wild and believe in interpretive dance. Your people wear cufflinks to bed." He stood and offered her a hand, "So let's introduce them. Might be fun watching the universe implode." And implode it did. At Sweet Caroline's, the contrast was cinematic. On one side of the room, Nathaniel's bored, stoic-suited, radiating Wall Street confidence. On the other, Lily's tribe of artists, writers, and musicians draped in color and creativity, quoting Sylvia Plath over cocktails. Is that Nathaniel Quinn? In denim, one board member whispered in horror, "Is that Lily Hart with a billionaire?" Her friend Jasmine hissed. "The same Lily who uses coupons that expired last spring." The silence was awkward until Harrison, the ever-serious CFO, cleared his throat and turned to Lily. "So, Miss Hart, what's your investment strategy?" She grinned brightly. "Joy, I invest in joy. Also, have you tried these mozzarella sticks? They might change your life." Harrison blinked visibly. "Malfunctioning." "She means emotional returns," Nathaniel offered, leaning back casually. "Not everything can be measured by your calculator, Hart." Harrison gasps erupted from both camps. Even the bartender dropped a glass. Then someone from Lily's side, Marcus, not the assistant but the painter, stood and shouted, "Karaoke battle artists versus suits." And that's how the most bizarre, unforgettable karaoke showdown in Halcyon Bay history began. Fueled by a combination of cocktails and competitive bravado, the once stern members of Quinn and Vale's board were now standing on bar stools, belting out dramatic renditions of 80s power ballads like their careers depended on it. Across the bar, Lily's friends answered the challenge in full chaotic glory with interpretive dance numbers set to show tunes that made the bartender weep with joy or confusion. No one could quite tell. Then came the moment no one expected. "Nathaniel Quinn," Jasmine called, grinning with wicked delight. "Your turn. And the rule is, you have to sing a love song." The entire bar fell into stunned silence. Nathaniel Quinn did not do love songs. He did mergers. He did market forecasts. He did boardroom silence and perfectly tailored suits. But then the opening notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love" began to drift through the speakers. He stepped forward, slowly, took the microphone and scanned the room until his eyes found Lily. She stood frozen, hand over her mouth. He didn't glance at the lyrics. He didn't need to. Wise men say only fools rush in. His voice, deeper and more textured than anyone expected, cut through the noise. It wasn't polished, but it was honest raw. "Open. But I can't help falling in love with you." Lily's friends exchanged wide-eyed looks. The board members sat speechless. Someone in the back started recording. Glasses were lowered. Conversations stopped. As the final note hung in the air, the crowd erupted in applause, but Nathaniel didn't notice Lily was already moving toward him. Without thinking, he reached out, pulled her close, and kissed her soft. And sure as if the rest of the world had finally stepped aside for just one moment of truth, time stopped. Phones flashed. A drink was knocked over and no one cared. When they pulled apart, breathless, Lily whispered, "Your board is watching." "Let them," Nathaniel replied, then kissed her again. By sunrise, the internet had exploded. Nathaniel Quinn, usually a headline for acquisitions and innovation, was suddenly trending worldwide for something very different. Flower in his hair, singing a love ballad and kissing a baker under string lights. His phone buzzed non-stop. Markets shifted. Commentators speculated. Investors panicked. Sir Carter said breathlessly, bursting into the office, "The board is in full revolt." "They say this thing with Miss Hart is making you lose your edge." Nathaniel stared at the photo on his screen. He was laughing, surrounded by people he used to dismiss, looking freer than he had in decades. "Then they're dismissed," he said simply. Carter blinked. "All of them." "Yes, effective immediately." "Sir, you can't just—" "Carter," Nathaniel interrupted, turning away from his desk. "In the past few weeks, I've learned how to bake a cupcake I've sung in public. I've discovered gas station wine doesn't kill you. And I've laughed more than I have in 30 years. He moved to the window and gazed out at the city that no longer felt like his alone. If they think happiness is a liability, they don't belong here. Carter was silent for a moment, then softly asked, "What's the new business plan?" Sir Nathaniel smiled. "I'm going to fall in love with Lily Hart, properly. No boardroom schemes, no contracts, just love and the company. And who knows? Maybe we'll both thrive. Turns out emotional intelligence might be the most undervalued asset on the market. That afternoon, he arrived at the Hearthstone oven, holding a bouquet, not of roses, but of carefully tied sacks of flour wrapped in twine and ribbon. Lily opened the door and blinked. "What on earth is this?" Roses felt too obvious. "And I figured you'd appreciate the practical." She laughed, pulled him inside and threw her arms around his neck. "You're completely absurd. I know you're rubbing off on me." Then he pulled back slightly, looked her in the eye. "Lily, I let them go. The board." "What?" Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because they thought falling in love with you was bad for business. And is it?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "It's the smartest decision I've ever made." His hands cupped her face as he whispered, "I love you, Lily Hart. I love your awful puns, your overbaked scones, and the way you find light in everyone, even a man like me." Her eyes shimmered. "I love you too, you infuriating man. Even if you can't fold batter to save your life." They kissed again softly this time as a gentle drift of flour dust floated through the late afternoon light. From across the street unseen behind a cafe window, one of the recently fired board members watched and slowly, perhaps grudgingly, smiled. Across the street from the Hearthstone oven behind the tinted windows of a corner cafe, several former board members from Quinn and Vale sat in stunned silence, nursing lattes and disbelief. "He's really lost it," Harrison muttered, shaking his head slowly. No said. Johnson, the only one who'd somehow survived every corporate purge. He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "He's finally found it." A few heads turned. "Love's the one merger that never depreciates," Johnson added with a shrug. "Also, I've started taking baking classes." My wife's thrilled. Back at the bakery, Lily and Nathaniel sat on milk crates surrounded by flour sacks, sketching plans on napkins and dreaming in icing and ambition. So Lily said with a sly smile, "Want to help me bake cookies for the shelter's fundraiser? Only if we can talk about scaling this into a chain of non-profit bakeries across the city." She kissed his cheek. "There's my favorite former shark." "Reformed shark," he corrected. "I only bite cookies now." And in that warm, chaotic kitchen where dreams rose like bread in the oven, two people who once lived in parallel worlds found a way to build one together. 6 months passed, and the transformation was undeniable. Quinn and Vale International, once a marble and steel monument to efficiency, had evolved. The lobby now housed a colorful community board filled with flyers from local initiatives. The executive cafe served Lily's kindness cookies with proceeds funding youth culinary programs. "You've turned my company into a feel-good factory." Nathaniel mock grumbled as he helped Lily arrange decorations inside the new Sweet Hearth Community Center. "And your quarterly earnings are up 40%, she shot back, reaching up to fix his crooked tie. "Seems like kindness pays." He patted his coat pocket for the third time. "Is everything set for tonight?" "Stop fussing." She laughed. "It's just a grand opening, not the royal wedding." If only she knew. The center was everything Lily had dreamed of. Spacious industrial kitchens, classrooms that smelled of cinnamon and ambition, and a cafe where no one needed money to feel welcome. Nathaniel had funded the entire project, but only after she made him promise one thing. Not charity, she'd told him. Partnership. That's how real change happens. As the evening sun cast long golden rays through the tall windows, the center filled with guests. Former board members clinked glasses with tattooed poets. Homeless men shared homemade pastries with hedge fund analysts. At the front door, Henry, once just a shadow in an alley, now stood tall as director of outreach, his eyes full of purpose. Speech time. Jasmine called gently, pushing Lily toward the microphone. Dressed in a soft linen dress, flour already dusting one shoulder, Lily looked out at the crowd, her heart full. "When I opened my little bakery," she began, voice steady, I believed food made with love could change the world. I just never imagined I'd meet someone who'd help me prove it. She scanned the room until her eyes found him. Half a year ago, a grumpy billionaire barged into my shop demanding coffee. He got a face full of flour and a long lesson in humility instead. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Nathaniel smiled, remembering every absurd, perfect moment. But what I've come to believe, Lily continued, is that even the hardest hearts can soften. With the right ingredients, a cup of compassion, a spoonful of patience, and a whole lot of love, you can turn anything around. She raised her glass to Nathaniel Quinn, for showing me that together we really can bake a better world. The applause was thunderous, but quiet fell as Nathaniel stepped forward. Even now, when he took the room, it listened. Lily Hart. He began, his voice warm and sure. You've spent the last 6 months telling me I take life too seriously, that I treat the world like a ledger, that I think everything has a price. He paused, reaching into his pocket. You were right, but you also taught me something else. Love, trust, family. Nathaniel said, voice catching slightly. Those aren't given, they're earned. Then with quiet reverence he lowered himself onto one knee. The room fell utterly silent. I've spent 6 months trying to earn the right to ask you this question. Lily Hart. He opened the velvet box. It didn't hold a diamond. Inside was a delicate silver cupcake charm, its top glinting with a single tiny diamond like a sugar crystal. Will you marry me? He asked softly. Not as the billionaire, not as the CEO, but simply as the man who loves you more than all the cupcakes in Halcyon Bay. Lily's hands flew to her mouth. Is that a cupcake charm? He nodded, his eyes shining. Because traditional symbols never impressed you, but I thought maybe this could remind you of where we started. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. Yes, she breathed, then practically launched herself into his arms. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes, applause erupted. Champagne corks popped. Flashbulbs lit the room as someone struck the opening notes of Sweet Caroline on the old upright piano in the corner. Wait Carter, now back as Nathaniel's assistant, and with considerably more flair, called out from the back. There's more. The far wall of the community center slid open to reveal a fully outfitted culinary classroom. Above the entrance, a sign read, The Lily Hart Foundation Test Kitchen. For the lessons you were always meant to share. Nathaniel said, guiding her forward, and maybe, for our children, one day. Lily turned, stunned. Children. He smiled. We should probably start with the wedding cake. 2 weeks later, the New York Times ran an unexpected headline, Quinn and Vale launches purpose-driven profit model. Stock soars. The article outlined how Nathaniel's new approach, investing in people while remaining profitable, was transforming the way corporations measured success. Other companies scrambled to adopt the so-called Quinn standard. But Nathaniel's favorite headline came from a small community paper. Local baker teaches billionaire the secret ingredient, love. The wedding was an extraordinary blend of their two worlds. Held at the very community center they built together, it featured a 5-tier cake Lily insisted on baking with Nathaniel's questionable help. The staff wore custom gowns designed by local artists. The hors d'oeuvres were a mix of caviar and pigs in blankets. As they danced their first dance to a smooth jazz rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love, Lily leaned in and whispered, Remember when you couldn't even hold a whisk? Nathaniel chuckled. Remember when you told me I couldn't buy happiness? She smirked. Still can't. No, he agreed, pulling her close. But I can bake it thanks to you. Across the room, the once-fired board members, now all rehired after completing Lily's workshop on emotional intelligence in leadership, raised their glasses to hostile takeovers of the heart, Harrison declared. The crowd roared with laughter and clinking glasses. Years later, business schools would teach the Quinn transformation as a landmark case study. graphs and growth charts would analyze it to death. But those who had been there, who knew the real story, understood this. It all began with a broken oven, a stubborn baker, and a man who learned that some of life's greatest recipes can't be bought, only shared. As Lily and Nathaniel cut their wedding cake, she gently dabbed frosting on his nose. For luck, she grinned. I already have all the luck I need, he whispered, kissing her anyway, sugar and all. And there, beneath the warm lights of the community kitchen, surrounded by artists and analysts, bakers and board members, Nathaniel Quinn finally understood the most important merger of all: not a company, not a deal, but the acquisition of a heart. Outside the bakery's new sign glowed gently in the evening air. Sweethearth, where every ending is just a new recipe for love. And just like Lily often said, with flower on her cheek and mischief in her smile, it was absolutely perfect. Not perfect in the polished, untouchable sense, but perfect in the way a warm cookie is crispy at the edges, soft in the center, and made with a little too much vanilla on accident perfect because it was real. The story of Nathaniel Quinn and Lily Hart became something more than just headlines or hashtags. It became a whispered legend in boardrooms and bakeries alike, a reminder that growth is not just upward on a chart, but inward into the heart. The cupcake charm proposal would go down as one of the most unexpected love gestures in Halcyon Bay history, not for its value, but for its meaning. It said, I see you. I remember where we began, and I never want to forget. The wedding itself wasn't grand by society's standards, but it was grand in spirit. Artists and accountants danced side by side. The cake was slightly lopsided on one tier because Nathaniel had insisted on frosting it himself. No one minded. It was a celebration of something rare and deeply needed in the world: harmony between worlds that once seemed impossible to unite. In the months that followed, the Sweethearth Community Center became a lighthouse for second chances. Homeless teens learned to bake, retired chefs taught classes. Former CEOs came to volunteer, trading their stock tips for spatulas. Henry, once cold and forgotten in an alleyway, now wore a name tag and a confident smile. Jasmine opened her own cafe gallery hybrid next door. Carter started a podcast on purpose-driven leadership. Even Harrison, the numbers-obsessed CFO, now baked on weekends with decent results. And as for Lily and Nathaniel, they didn't just build a life. They baked one day by day with love as the leavening. Years later, when their children would ask how it all began, Nathaniel would lift them onto his lap and say, well, once upon a time I fired an entire boardroom and fell in love with a woman who taught me how to make cinnamon rolls. And Lily would add, and he still can't fold the batter right. They would laugh together, as they always had. So if you're ever in Halcyon Bay and you pass by a warm little shop glowing beneath twinkle lights with the sign that reads Sweethearth, where every ending is a new recipe for love, step inside. You might just find a bit of yourself in the flour-dusted laughter, the music from the kitchen, or the quiet magic of two people who once changed the world one cupcake at a time. And so the man who once believed numbers mattered more than people, and the woman who believed love could rise like bread in a warm oven, built something far greater than any empire. They built a life, not perfect, but honest and full of joy, mess, and meaning. Because in the end, it wasn't the cupcakes or the charm bracelet, the community center or the skyrocketing stocks. It was the quiet moments, the courage to soften, the decision to choose each other again and again. Maybe that's what real success looks like. Not power, not wealth, but being seen, being loved, and daring to love in return. If this story touched your heart, help it reach someone else's. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to Shining Stories, where every tale is a reminder that the world still holds beauty, and every ending is just a new beginning.